Is Captain Paul McCauley.
That's Concordia. I want to echo the comments of my fellow colleagues from Dublin when we talk about Dublin and about how proud we are of that city. When we talk about the problems, often I suppose we serve to denigrate the city that we are all passionate about. But I am very proud of Dublin. I'm proud of it when they play in Croke Park. I'm proud of it when I visit many of the community projects that exist in this city. And I'm proud of it when I travel to other cities and I see what we do well. But I suppose if you really care about a city, if you really care about the place where you live, you want it to be better. And from my perspective, having served for 10 years on Dublin City Council and had the honour to represent the city, my view, there are 5 areas which we need to work on to strengthen Dublin's hand. And we don't talk about that in this House enough. There are often allegations that Dublin gets everything, that Dublin is growing at the detriment of rural Ireland. Well, I would say there are as many problems in Dublin as there are in any other part of the world. And I was once struck by the phrase, all of the problems of the world exist in cities, but the solutions often exist there too. And if we listen to our own communities, they're telling us that they want people who will make strong local decisions. So we need a reform of local government. The Government Citizens' Assembly on local government structures in Dublin is a very, very welcome step. And if I was Taoiseach, I would take that report. I would work with the members of this House who have a mandate to represent the people of Dublin, and I would legislate and implement that report. I would not waste time in putting it out to a plebiscite. I would not waste time in having an internal committee in here to review it. I would take Jim Gavin's report and I would legislate for it with gusto. Because I believe that if we do strengthen local government in Dublin, right from an executive mayor, whether that's directly or indirectly elected, right down to area committee structures, if we do that, we will serve the people of the city to a great degree. Because by doing that, we'll also hold to account the agencies that are allegedly meant to serve the people of Dublin, whether it's the National Transport Authority, whether it's EirGrid, whatever agencies are operating in this state, they should be accountable to the representatives of the people of the city, and not at a parliamentary level, but actually at a municipal level. So I believe the local government structures in Dublin do need to change. I think the Citizens' Assembly recommendations in advance of them being adopted should be seriously considered, and we should have an advanced accelerated process of implementing it by legislation. And I go back to that point then of the issue of agencies being accountable to the people of this city. There are millions of euro pouring into my area. I represent Ballymun and Finglas, Glasnevin and Santry. There are millions pouring in through drugs task forces, through youth centres, through family resource centres. There is a lot of money coming in through TUSLA and the HSE, but often there is very little transparency about how those decisions are made, about where the money is spent. And equally, there's very little coordination between the different agencies. And I do believe we need a more coordinated approach to service delivery, especially in those parts of the city that were left with a legacy where large housing developments were effectively abandoned. There were decades in this state where I believe we operated a policy of human set-aside, that people were allowed to live in large tracts of land without the proper services. But I think many of those services are in place. We should be really supportive of the people who work in those, but we need to coordinate and strengthen how they're delivered. Too often I'm at meetings and the HSE and TUSLA and senior decision makers in those organisations are not at the meetings, or their people empowered to make the decisions are not there to be accountable for why the decisions were made. So stronger local government, yes, but also coordinated policy or coordinated service delivery. Rethink Ireland were in the House yesterday addressing a number of TDs talking about social innovation, and they were talking about funding projects like Food Cloud and other projects. I think the best form of social innovation we could have is by reforming the public services and ensuring that those people who are working on the ground are empowered. The third thing I believe is that we have a realistic approach to the drugs industry in this city. If there ever was a war against drugs, we've lost it. It's over. Because I can walk out of this house and purchase drugs on any corner. There are people who tell me that there are parts of their estate where the shop, as they call it, is open all hours of the day and night. So we have to accept that drugs are freely available for sale and that thousands of people are purchasing that product. In fact, in my community, as a single industry, the drugs industry is probably one of the largest employers. That's a really sad thing to say. But as other deputies have said, it's a realistic response to the trauma that often exists. And there are many TDs in the House that might not be aware of what a trauma-informed community is. But it's no different than the trauma that existed in previous decades when many parents, often men, languished in pubs. And many of them people were the people who came out and fought against drugs in their community. But I think the debate around drugs has moved on from the anti-drugs marches. Because at the time, the concern was about the substance. If we allow that substance to take hold, then that substance will ravage our communities, that substance will impact people's individual lives. We have to stop thinking now about the substance because, in my view, the industry has a far greater impact on my area than the substance has on individuals. And that's not to say that taking drugs is a positive thing. That's not to say that I would necessarily agree with legalising it and it being freely available. What I'm saying is that there are criminal gangs, we all know the names, and they have a more detrimental impact on the safety of my community than the substance that they are selling. So we need to have trauma-informed communities. We need to have the Citizens' Assembly on drugs next year. And again, we need to legislate for its implementation. And I'd say one thing on that. I think we've had a lot of discussion at a policy level around the issue of decriminalisation. I don't believe that conversation has actually happened at a community level. And there are many families of people who have had an addiction that would be very, very opposed to any sort of liberalisation, as they might say, of drugs, because they didn't want that happening to any other person that happened to their family member. We need to engage with those communities and we need to talk to them about what decriminalisation might look like or what reforms of drugs might look like. The fourth item I think we come to is the issue of housing. When I was elected to this House in February 2020, the local authority that I had left, their only way of providing housing was to provide large-scale, low-income, single-tenure housing. That was the only policy instrument available to local authorities. We can all criticise Housing for All in terms of delivery and other aspects of it, but you can say with certainty now, local authorities have all of the policy instruments to develop mixed income, mixed tenure public housing. They have the financial resources, they have the different legislative policy resources for cost rental, owner-occupied affordable purchase and social housing. So that the days of building places like Ballymun and Finglas, concentrating low-income people in one place and then not having the services to support those communities should be gone. Because when we plan new communities, local authorities can now have that mix. The mix that we often debated on Dublin City Council about what percentage would go into which estates. We now have given local authorities the power to build those mixed income, mixed tenure estates. And I want to make sure that that idea of mixed income, mixed tenure, well-planned estates is embedded in the housing that goes forward. It has been done. We've legislated for in this House, and we now need to make sure that local authorities actually implement that. And the last point I would come to, the fifth proposal that I have for Dublin, is our economic success. So we know that all of the things that we've talked about here often require resources, and we shouldn't underestimate the positive role that business and enterprise and economic development plays in our city. Right from small operations where somebody starts their own business. It doesn't have to be an innovative idea that will change the world. It can be something very mundane as far as a policy expert might think. It can be about providing a service. But that person setting up that small business has a huge impact in their local community. They're often the person who sponsors the GAA club quicker than any chain of stores. But that impact right from that person in a small business right up to some of the biggest employers that we have here in the city is hugely and critically important to this city being successful. Now, yes, there has to be a balance between who the city is for. But I go back to a comment that was made for me once by a company investing here in Dublin. They said, a great city to invest in is a great city to live in. Because if someone is making a decision to come here, to build an office block, to own a piece of property, to do their business here, well then their managers, the people that they work for, the people they're looking to attract and retain, want to have a positive city to live in. So if we want Dublin to be a good economic city, a successful economic city, we have to make it a great city to live in too. And I believe by having stronger local government, coordinated public services that are connected with communities, if we have a realistic approach to the drugs industry, if we build mixed income and mixed tenure communities that are well planned, and we secure economic success and investment, then we can make Dublin an even greater place than it is today.
Margaret.